Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Wow! All of a sudden, I was very excited about that. Good morning. It is May 17th, Monday, May 17th, 2021. Time for another show. Time for me to remind you, apparently, it turns out, I see Bill's morning tweet here that says that I today will, in today's live show, which is live now, not later, it's happening right now. I'll remind you that today, May 17th, I didn't even know this. I'm great at reminding you of things. Reminding you that today, May 17th, is the extended tax filing deadline, which is good because the coronavirus pandemic is over. I heard officially it was over the weekend or something like that. Now you got to pay your taxes. So get your taxes done, or tonight you get nothing but bamboo fibers for dinner, all left over from Arizona, where they're finding millions of them. No word on whether they're finding any bamboo on that stuff, by the way, or whether bamboo, of course, means anything, or whether ultraviolet light actually helps you find bamboo fibers. I would be interested in just seeing some of that demonstrated at some point. But I guess I think everything's on hold in Arizona at the moment because the venue that they rented out, the convention center that they rented out to conduct their fake audit, and it is a fake audit, is booked for graduations, and they have had to pack up all the ballots and store them until after the graduation season, and then their plan is to rent the place again and pull it all out again and start, not all over again, but not to start again, but to continue their, work, I guess is what they would call it. So far, I understand that the packing up has been done with no regard whatsoever for preservation of the integrity of the ballots. I mean, those were ruined a long time ago, but this is just a haphazard thing. They never knew how long it was going to take them. They never made any plans for how long it was going to take them. It was unprofessional from the start. I guess you could have told, really, the minute somebody, if you're sitting at a desk somewhere in charge of things and someone brings you a contract that says, sign this, what's it for? It's to pay cyber ninjas a bunch of money. Probably at that point you say, well, hold on a second. Money? Like actual money? I'd like to find out a little bit more about these cyber ninjas and why we're paying them. And, well, I guess that never happened. Anyway, there are some very interesting write-ups we could share about those things. Greg Dworkin has his usual raft of stories all prepared and ready to go, and maybe has the new computer prepared and ready to go. He's got something, I'm sure, prepared and ready to go. He's already sharing the raft of stories over the river of the internet that brings them to us on Skype. So hopefully everything is going to work as planned. Well, let's see. Here's our first chance to find out. Good morning, Greg. How you doing? You all hooked up with the new computer and everything?
Almost, just about.
All right.
I got pretty much all my programs.
Okay.
But because it's a new operating system, buttons
I don't know where they
that you push change things.
Change things the way they're set up, or are they in
places? I try to download something, and then the button at the very, very bottom that says, okay, go ahead and do this once you've chosen where is hidden because that screen is too big.
Oh,
little things, annoying things like that.
Right.
You can get to the same place by hitting the return button, but it's like, why did you do this to me? And it's not the new monitor; it's the new computer because it's the new operating system. Because make it smaller so I could see it.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's probably a thing somewhere that'll teach you how to do that, and
Yeah, but I haven't gotten to that yet.
Just
That's
wait
why
for
it's about
grandchildren
95%
to grow
done.
up and teach you. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it seems to be functioning in terms of the part where we hear you, so that's good news.
Yeah, at least it had some old style, ports that I could plug the microphone into, so I was pretty happy about that.
Yeah. I'm looking at Skype right up on my screen now. I realize it's got a little iconography for everything, and it occurs to me that the icons that they use for the camera and the microphone and the telephone don't look like what most cameras, telephones, or microphones look like anymore, and haven't looked like that for about 20 years.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering when, at some point, like millennial Gen Z people are going to be like, what are these weird squiggles? I understand that it's used for indicating, audio, but why?
Well, the do
Is that a
not
mouth?
sign, the Ghostbusters thing, the circle with the line through that you
Yeah.
put over
Right.
stuff that you don't want done. They should put them on
Ghostbusters
bathroom
not
doors,
poison. Yeah.
right? No microphone, no telephone, no camera,
That's true.
and let people figure it out.
If they just need to make the picture underneath the slash.
I can't
look
understand
right.
half the icons I see anyway. So what about these?
Yeah, it is interesting that for Americans, that circle slash thing was popularized by Ghostbusters. We figured out what are Europeans saying here?
Well,
they're
I'm
saying,
trying to give you a
don't be
verbal
afraid of no
picture here
ghosts.
for your listening audience.
It's even there. People are like, you mean the Melissa McCarthy thing? What? Yeah.
What? Huh? Which?
Yeah. Just ancient. Okay, fine.
So
we've
let's
managed
talk.
to
Let's
use this
talk.
for news. So that's new stuff. We'll talk about the new things.
Yeah. So a lot of the stuff dominating the news over the weekend, of course, there's the blow up / war / invasion in the Middle East. We're not going to really do that.
We can't.
There's still a lot
Not
to be
good at
sorted
it.
out there, and there's nothing good can come of it. And it's not good. None of it is good.
You need to talk to people who really
the
know.
domestic stuff that we're talking about over the weekend, a lot has to do with CDC, and I thought it was worthwhile spending a little bit of time on that. And I have
We know
two
about
pretty
that.
good articles for people who are interested. The first one is from CNN, which is a Maggie Fox article, and I've known Maggie for
Maggie
15
Fox.
years. She's a very good science reporter. What's the science behind CDC's decision to say fully vaccinated people don't need masks?
Oh, yes. Please.
And then there's a support article in a similar vein from NBC News. Here's the science that convinced the CDC to lift mask mandates.
Yes.
So a little backstory there. Back in the day when CDC used to run pandemic drills, they would often invite the press. And back in that era, in the 2007, 8, 9 era, they would even invite bloggers to
Yes.
witness and to participate, if they wanted to, in these pandemic drills. And the idea that CDC had is that if we invite the press in, with their minders, mind you, so you don't wander off and suddenly find yourself in the part of the building that has smallpox, even though they're not supposed to, because it's been eradicated, So
Yeah.
I didn't say that. But
They don't have it.
They don't have it. So
Don't go in there looking for it.
they'd let everybody watch, and they'd see, and they'd participate, and they tried to be as open and transparent as possible about how things work. And one of the things you learn when you participate in those sorts of things is how the CDC actually functions. Do not think of them as the Department of Homeland Security. They're not up there mandating things.
Okay.
They're more like the Department
Yes.
of Education. They make some suggestions that they think are reasonable, and then they hope you follow them. But they have no enforcement capabilities. That's done at state level. And the way that they make decisions is they have a bunch of experts there, some more expert than others, certainly some more expert at communicating than others. And they get together and they go through the data. They do field trips. They do investigations by sending their own people to the site of a question.
Field trips. That's a nice way
And
of putting it.
and then they come back and they say, okay, this is what we learned, this is what we see, this is what we think.
Ebola.
And then after they have some sort of consensus internally about what they should suggest, they then get on a conference call with 50 plus state and territorial epidemiologists and heads of state health departments, which is where the action is. And then they try to herd like cats 50 plus people with varying degrees of expertise, and by the way, varying degrees of political savvy. Some are all political, not so much science. Some are all science, not so much political. Some are both. Some are neither. And it's just a very interesting mix of people. And trying to get that consensus amongst that group of people can take hours. And so once they do that, then they discuss it at committee level, and then they come out with a recommendation. So the idea that the CDC changed their mind overnight is ludicrous. That's not what happens.
Okay.
What happens is that the messaging changes overnight. But the decision-making process can take weeks and weeks and weeks, and the problem isn't that they're too fast, it's that they're too slow. Then the other problem is that when they are in the process of making that kind of decision, they tell you that they would like to be as transparent as possible, and they're not. So that when Rachel Walensky, who's the current head of the CDC, announced that they were changing the guidelines on masks, she knew that was coming. It doesn't just happen, I woke up this morning and we decided to do it. And yet the day before and the day before and the day before, she hadn't said anything about it. And that was part of the problem. It's not that the decision was made too quickly. It's that the announcement was made too quickly. And that if you're going to change policy based on what you think is the science, and the science is basically, as Maggie Smith writes up, a fresh batch of data she wrote from a big study of healthcare workers across the country helped prompt the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to say fully vaccinated people can go without masks in most circumstances, and that was said Friday. The study found that real-life use of Moderna and Pfizer vaccines provided 94% protection to the frontline workers immunized at the beginning of the vaccine rollout. And, of course, those are the people that had the biggest exposure.
Yes.
You know, lots of sick people around them, high viral loads, and yet the frontline workers who were immunized did great. A single dose provided 82% protection. It was the findings from the new study on top of earlier studies that pushed CDC to decide to loosen its advice. The report provided the most compelling information to date that COVID-19 vaccines were performing as expected in the real world. But the thing is, it's their studies, and they knew that those studies were coming, and they knew that they were going to do this. So to say nothing about it Thursday and then all of a sudden drop this bombshell on Friday felt weird, felt wrong, felt
Friday's
rushed.
a bad day for it too, but yeah.
And it may well have been the right decision to make, but the way that it was released was terrible. And so that opens them up to all sorts of criticism. Saturday Night Cold Open was making fun of them, which was actually pretty funny in a lot of ways. But this is what was behind the decision. And the thing is, it really depends upon where you are at in your own communities. Up here in the Northeast, we've got reasonable vaccine rates compared to the rest of the country, but it's still very spotty. In my hometown, 50% of folks are vaccinated who are eligible. Mm-hmm. And in some of the tonier suburbs around me, it's higher. But in the city of Danbury, it's only 34. And that's just a couple of miles away. That's 15 minutes away by car as we measure distance in New York City.
Virus doesn't drive, but
how far is it? Well, this is how long it takes you to get there.
Yes.
Well, I didn't ask you how long it took you to get there. I asked you how far it was. No, if you're talking to a New Yorker, you are asking how long it takes to get there.
Yes.
How far is it to just go across town? An hour.
Right. That's the way we do things in the small eastern states. Out west where, you could drive for days without leaving the state. I guess the mileage counts.
A totally different picture.
How many times you got to fill up the tank?
So Ashish Jha, the Dean of School of Public Health over in Rhode Island, said, thoughts on CDC mask update. They got the science right. Fully vaccinated folks don't need to wear masks indoors. But there's one major problem. How do you know who's vaccinated? There's actually a second major problem if you're the parent of a under 12-year-old. And what if you have immunocompromised people in your home? So these are all problems. So the states and companies are getting policy response to CDC guidance wrong. In response to CDC, states and businesses have three choices. Figure out who is vaccinated or not, which is hard to do, but doable.
Okay.
Drop mask requirements. Hope for the honor system. Easy to do, not great. And that's what most people are doing because it's easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or keep masking a bit longer. Not hard to do, and it's much better. And that's what some people are doing.
Yeah, some.
So that's what's going on. Now, if you try to figure out who's
some are
vaccinated,
doing both somehow.
Then you have to realize that vax verification systems are coming, and they're generally going to be driven by business. If you drop the mask mandates and hope, which is what we're doing, not a great idea because lots of folks are still not yet vaccinated, and that means high infection levels. And, why do you mask? I'm fully vaccinated. I'm not going to get sick, and I'm really not a threat to anybody else. But I acknowledge that there are people there who aren't vaccinated, and they're going to be in the same place with other people who are not vaccinated. Mm-hmm. And if we don't all wear masks, it's going to spread.
Yeah.
So that's basically the reason why I continue to wear a mask if I go to Trader Joe's or Starbucks, even though they
Yes.
say you don't have to.
I went there yesterday, Trader Joe's, and
And,
they didn't say, and everybody was wearing masks.
well,
But they
depending
did
on
let
where
you,
you live, that
yeah.
may be
Here,
what happens.
yes, I live here.
I
So
live here.
there you go.
I live here at Trader Joe's. I live right here, not before.
The big compromise was everyone wore masks, but they would let you use your own reusable bags again, which they haven't for a long time.
Which is great. So here's why business states should wait a bit. People who become eligible on April 19th, the rule followers who didn't jump the line, will become fully vaccinated no later than June 15th. Right. Infection levels are still high across the country, but falling. And in about a month, we'll be less than 20,000 cases a day. We're like 35,000 a day, which is way down from what it was, but still too high. So the bottom line is that people get angry at CDC, not for what they said, but how others use what they said. And let's focus on getting states' businesses to implement policy right now. Zainab Tufekci, who also studies these things as a sociologist, said it was too big a jump from don't do this to do this. And people just weren't ready for it, and so they got angry.
Yes. A lot of people said, or the phrasing for it was, they got the science right, but the social science wrong.
Yeah, something along those lines. Yeah. And that may be. It's just that it's so weird to accuse CDC of moving too fast, because if you know anything about CDC or government in general, it's like, what?
Yeah, I guess that is unusual. So it probably wouldn't stand to reason. And then it didn't.
And it didn't. Okay. So I thought that was kind of important. There's another thing about the science of the virus that is somewhat under discussion, a little bit less.
All right.
Nicholas Wade and some other people have written various and sundry pieces about how we really should go back and look and see whether that virus really came from that Chinese lab in Wuhan, because they were doing gain-of-function study. And the problem is that when people who write books about, there really is a difference between races, and people who are supportive of the Trump administration and their approach to stigmatizing the virus, say you really should look at the Wuhan lab, it immediately becomes toxic and politicized. Yeah. And so it's very hard to look at that and say, I don't know what to do with that. If you want to study it, you have to depoliticize it. So those are exactly the wrong people to try to suggest that you look at it.
Yes.
There are pretty much, there is no consensus about the fact that it wasn't, that it's all a fantasy. We just don't know because they're not really good at the CDC is bad at transparency. China's worse. So we don't know. But I will just say that I would ignore it's obviously from the lab, because now there's a consensus that it is, which is the line that they're pushing. That's not true. And it really should be studied, but not by them. So that's all
all right. So like you might audit a vote count in Maricopa County, but not by cyber ninjas.
Yeah. Speaking of Maricopa County, funny you should bring that up.
It is funny.
So Maricopa County
itself.
I mean, this is in the Pundit Roundup. It's the first tweet I have there.
All right. Let's look. Yes.
Right. Did I give you the link to the Pundit Roundup?
Oh, yeah. It's always there. It's automatic. I think
Maricopa County. The 2020 elections were run with integrity. The results certified by the county and state were accurate, and the two independent audits conducted by the county are the true final word on the subject. We know auditing. The Senate Cyber Ninja audit is not a real audit.
That's
says Maricopa County.
Yeah. I mean, the county says, no, it's not real.
Right.
Okay,
even
it's
better,
no one.
Maricopa County, Arizona official who's in charge of elections, a Republican named Stephen Rescher,
that guy,
Maricopa County recorder, personal account, looked at Trump's statement about claiming that parts of the database, in fact, the entire database in Maricopa County in Arizona had been deleted. It's illegal, and it's just proof that he won.
Illegal.
Wrote, this is unhinged. In fact, his quote is, wow, this is unhinged.
Right.
I'm literally looking at our voter registration database on my other screen right now.
Yeah, two screens.
So it wasn't deleted. We can't indulge these insane lies any longer, he wrote, as a party, as a state, as a country. This is as readily falsifiable as 2 + 2 = 5. If we don't call this out,
he doesn't answer.
So that's part of the deal there. So AP in Politico had a piece, enough with the defamation, enough with the unfounded allegations. I came to this office to competently, fairly, and lawfully administer the duties of the office, not to be accused by my own party of shredding ballots and deleting files for an election I didn't run. Enough.
No, he's fed up, is he?
So he's fed up, yes.
Yeah.
We have local officials here in Connecticut who are quitting the Republican Party over it. And although everybody knows that Liz Cheney lost her battle to keep her leadership position, we're still talking about it, which means that in that sense she's winning the war. Casey Burgat over at Mischief's Faction has a whole piece about why Republicans ousting Liz Cheney. And they summarize pretty much what's going on, I think, really well. Why is this happening now, they write? The answer to the why now question stems from a big misconception about political leaders in Washington.
Oh.
What they subsequently say is not a misconception. They say the fact. They're only leaders if they have followers. Leaders hold their jobs so long as a majority of the caucus lets them, in this case conference.
Yes,
if they no longer serve the party's goals, political, electoral, messaging, they're usually forced out, often with a resignation that says they want to spend more time with their families.
Yes, right. Okay, we're more familiar with that.
Right? One need to look no further back than the forced resignations of former speakers Boehner and Ryan.
Right.
So if McCarthy
what did their families get out of that, by the way?
took Liz Cheney's side, he'd be out, in other words, which is why he's doing it and why he's doing it now. They're
we bring this point up all the time. These guys are beholden to their caucus or conference. If they're not kicked out, it's because that's what they want.
Right. First, the why. The simple answer is that the party can't keep this particular fissure behind the scenes. Cheney refuses to stay silent despite public and private threats from party leaders. And the media can't help but cover the fight. Inter-party fights are too juicy to ignore, which is true. So it's going to be in the news, and she's going to win the news cycle every time because of it.
All right.
For many congressional Republicans, Cheney's breaking the Hippocratic oath of politics do no harm to members of the same party.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Many Republican representatives represent incredibly safe districts where former President Trump remains the party's most popular figure. Speaking out against him is tantamount to inviting a primary challenge from a more conservative challenger, putting their own jobs at risk. Just look at what's happening in Georgia, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And in this instance, it's become clear that enough House GOP lawmakers have had enough of Cheney. The conference wants her gone. They made it clear they aren't backing down. McCarthy can't contain the revolt anymore, even if he wanted to. As a result, he's been forced into a binary choice. Continue to defend Cheney, knowing he's on the other side of most of his members, which is where no leader wants to be, or join the call for her removal and put the weight of his leadership post behind the effort. And this is typical leadership in Congress. See where the parade is going, run out in front and say, I'm leading.
Yeah.
Now, the parade was going in another direction after he defended Cheney the first time. So he ran and got in front of the parade in the other direction.
Yeah.
That's what happened, right? And so nobody's confused about that. The thing is, it just may not work the way they want. And there's a lot of reasons to think that. For example, okay, what's going on within the GOP party? CBS poll over the weekend. Removal of Liz Cheney from GOP leadership among Republicans aware of the removal. 80% agree, 20% disagree. These are the voters.
All right.
Right. Margin of error 3.7. So you may look at this and say, okay, you know, the Republicans want this. This is who the Republicans are. And you focus on that 80%. I look at it and say, hey, 20% disagree? You lose them. You lose elections.
Yeah, well, I hope so.
Right?
Yeah.
Second question. Why do you agree with Liz Cheney's removal, if you do? 69% said she's not on message with the party. We want people in lockstep. Okay? That means 31% don't agree with that.
Yeah.
She's wrong about the 2020 election. That's the big one.
Okay.
57% say she's wrong about the 2020 election. That's why I can't support her. But that's a big chunk that don't agree with that.
Yes.
Right? And so you get them. Again, it's big. She didn't support Trump. 52% said that. That means 48% don't see it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So there is room for all of that. And, I think it's important in that context that there's another piece by the political scientists in the Monkey Cage today, Catherine Clayton in Washington Post. If the GOP civil war keeps up, voters are likely to flee. Not all voters. They'll still get the majority of the voters, as we were seeing with those polls. But you're talking about a healthy chunk that might leave, and where are they going to go? They're not going third party, although Republicans are sort of pushing that a little bit. I want to change my party back to where it was. Well, that's not going to happen. I want to form a third party that's the true Republican Party. Well, that's not going to happen either. America is not anything but a two-party system. That leaves Democrats.
Yeah.
How will the Civil War
here,
affect
though.
Republican voters? In new research, she says, I find this internal battle may push away Republicans who aren't particularly committed to the party, those who call themselves not very strong Republicans, or consider themselves political independents who lean toward the GOP. Mm-hmm. And chances are they'll vote for Democrats.
Maybe,
in other words, the Republican Party's internal civil war could push some less committed Republican voters to the Democrats. And there's more to the story, of course. Research has limitations. News article about GOP conflict didn't use any names. In real life, what voters think about individuals would affect how they perceive the infighting. Other news sources or commentaries could convince them that somebody like Cheney is a so-called rhino, Republican in name only. Tough to do with Cheney. You could do that with other people. You could do that with Charlie Crist. It's tough to do with Cheney.
Yeah, well,
with her pedigree. Right. That is the Republican Party. You can't. You can convince people she's wrong, that she's mistaken, that she doesn't represent their values, but very difficult to to convince Mr. and Mrs. Republican that they're not Republicans.
Yeah. Well, how do we find this out for sure if we're still not dining in diners?
Actual elections.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I don't know if we still have that.
But that's the news there.
Okay.
At the same time, as the break comes up, here's one we'll probably leave for after the break, but it's interesting. Teflon Joe muddies GOP's midterm strategy. Biden is proving to be a less than ideal foil, forcing Republicans to rethink the traditional formula for 2022, which is to run against the president, and if they screw that up, they'll win. So it's not all bad news out there.
Well, I think they're reconfiguring their whole plan anyway. Like, if we don't get enough votes, can we still say we won? Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Apparently, there's more news than just that. I am at a loss as to tell you what it is. Most of my news is about looking back at old news, as it turns out, but okay. Let's see. Greg, you mentioned that there were some things that might have to wait until after the break. What are those things?
Since it's after the break?
Yes.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about Teflon Joe here.
All right. Good.
In Politico, this piece, Teflon Joe muddying everything. When the National Republican Senatorial Committee, the NRSC, sought to attack four vulnerable Senate Democrats in a series of new ads, President Joe Biden was nowhere to be found. They just had pictures of Raphael Warnock, who, by the way, happens to be tall. That's why they put him in there, right? Mark Kelly,
I see.
Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire, and Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada, next to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who represents San Francisco values, something they've been running on for 20 years with very little success. It's and increasingly less success, I should point out. It's a phenomenon that's becoming increasingly pronounced as the outline of the 2022 midterm election comes to focus. They're typically a referendum on the party in power, so the standard Oppo playbook is to make every down-ballot race about the sitting president. In fact, what's happening is the Democrats are making it about Trump. That's what's going to happen in Virginia, in your own state.
Yes.
In the state we love so much, right? Because we love people there.
Yes.
And what's going to happen is that it's the Democrats that are going to run against Trump, and the Republicans are going to play all this gauzy, we're just, good old folks who just want to be right down the middle on everything and put away all of this partisanship and, just concentrate on stuff. And the Democrats are going to say, what are you talking about? You support Trump. Go ahead and say you don't.
Yeah, I mean, right,
here,
that's true.
right now.
I dare you to say
you
it.
don't. I want to hear you. Say you don't support Trump. Oh, you do? Well, then guess what? You do. And our voters are going to need to know that.
Okay. I mean, the guy won't stop talking, although it's great to see him deplatformed. We should talk about that a little bit at some point. About how effective that's been. He's still the bottom line for me is he still does spend the weekends ranting. I just don't realize it.
Yeah, and I don't pay attention. But again, the important part is what his voters think, what the people in Congress think, not what he thinks. Interviews with more than 25 GOP strategists and party officials depict a president whose avuncular style, that would be Biden, a real president, and genial bearing make him a less than ideal foil. He doesn't induce anger or rage, and at the moment, his White House is relatively drama-free. So in response, Republicans are preparing to break with time-honored custom and cast the president less as a central character than as an accessory to the broader excesses of the left. Biden's not a good bad guy, said Ed Rogers, a veteran Republican lobbyist. Obama was a haughty professor. The Uncle Joe life story he has, it's hard to demonize him. It's all legit. God damn it, he's tough to really do this because he's like telling the truth about himself. I hate it.
Okay.
Good. Okay, fine. But that's true. And so, with that going on, again, I would remind people that it's an uphill battle for the Democrats to keep the House because close margins, redistricting, White House in power, opposite party often gains. But, and there's so many big buts here. There's a lot of big buts in it, and I have to tell you.
Great.
Really big butts. And the big butt here is that you don't know what's going to happen. And there's a lot that's going to come out in terms of people like Matt Gaetz. And today's the day that his wingman gets to plead guilty and say, yep, I did it. And there were people that did it with me. I'm naming names. Yeah. And guess who they're going to name, Yeah. So there's a lot going on there. And that matters. And Trump is still a scandal, and that matters. And one of the big things talking about San Francisco values, apparently one of the San Francisco values is to be really super good at your job.
Oh, all right.
And so one of the things that Pelosi is particularly good about, everybody knows she's a great vote counter, but she wrangled a agreement with the Republicans, clearly seen as a win for her by everybody in Washington, on the January 6th commission.
Oh, yes.
Right now,
maybe.
She made it bipartisan by having equal number of people, and the way that subpoenas can be gotten is a little klutzy there. But Kevin McCarthy privately agreed to it through his envoy, John Katko, and publicly disavows it, but isn't really super fighting it. And the fact is, he's going to be subpoenaed. And he doesn't know what to do about that. And the thing that's driving him crazy right now is he's a witness.
Yes.
And if he does too much, he's going to be a witness tamperer.
Yeah, that too. And I think he's planning on doing too much.
Well, that may be, but it's a bad situation. So you add that on top of why should he be speaker? Why should we elect Republicans to make him speaker? I don't know. Even if the Republicans do wind up taking the majority, it's not clear to me he is going to be speaker, even though he thinks he is.
Yeah. Because
he's really ticked off a lot of people in his conference because they know he is like total blind ambition and will throw anybody under the bus. He's proven it.
Yeah. That's not going to, work in his favor probably. And, I don't know how he'll combat these things, except I guess at that point, look out if you're a member of his family. As you pointed out and told us, a lot of these chairs and often the speaker itself is a leadership position, which is based on how much money have you raised for me. Yes.
In this particular case, I don't know if that's enough.
Maybe not. They've always been a little bit more ideological in their leadership elections, and maybe it's because they're all already swimming in money. I don't know, but they've and it's funny because that's a characteristic that a lot of people inside the Democratic Party would actually like to emulate, but it comes at a price.
Big Tent, a lot less ideological. You can't be. I mean, just see what's going on there.
Yeah.
So I just think that's a fascinating storyline that hasn't completely played out. And until you get a real good handle on how that's going to play out, you're not in a position to predict what's going to happen in terms of the election in 2022 with the House. Okay. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying the Democrats are guaranteed to win. No. It's an uphill battle. But they're not guaranteed to lose either. And
right.
just because you can look and say, well, what usually happens is this and that. Well, fine. How did Trump become president? What usually happened didn't happen.
Right. Usually there's a handover, peaceful transfer of power, and we didn't have that either. So.
Right. And there's usually not an insurrection.
Right.
And usually people weren't killed about it. And usually there isn't somebody from the Republican Party who has decided that the platform that she's been given by the media is going to be used every day to talk about the fact that it's ridiculous. And usually you don't have something like Arizona recounts and individual state suppression laws to keep the base riled up, the other base,
right?
Your opponent base. So a whole lot of stuff is happening, and younger people do show up and they do vote and they're paying attention. So I just don't know what's going to happen yet. Don't have a good feel for it.
Okay.
Doesn't mean that the bulk of Republicans aren't going to be who they say they are and who we say they are, which happens to be the same thing in this particular case.
Or just repeating what
but
they say.
I'm used to 92% Republican agreement on stuff. So when you see 80, that's like, wow, that's pretty low.
I guess that's, that's true. Well, we'll see what the effect of that is. They are,
Oh, don't forget, as you've pointed out to us many times, on the other hand, if you can't run against San Francisco values, you can run against Dr. Seuss, Mr. Potato Head, Law and Order.
That. Right.
And by the way, look at that picture of Raphael Warnock. He may be tall, but...
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. So he's prominently featured in their literature, is he?
Is he already? Yeah.
Okay.
He's hardly there.
We'll keep an eye on that. And Kevin McCarthy's family, look out. You may be spending more time with your guy at some point soon. Okay.
Now, another interesting thing that's going to change a little bit of the perception of how things go in Congress is what Congress does. This is ProPublica. There's been a 27% increase in short-term health insurance plans since Trump deregulated the market. These plans are not required to be ACA compliant, have gotten longer and longer, and left people with huge surprise bill. Okay. So the short-term junk plans are, in fact, junk.
And short.
But they're also junk.
Yes, that's the important part.
The contrast with that, which I think is important, is the sea change, as NBC News puts it. Let me give you that article there, just hunting it up for you. With Obamacare, subsidies in White House push leads to surge in Obamacare signups. It's like a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm blown away, said a woman who was able to afford health insurance for the first time in 12 years. Cheryl Hagan is one of more than 1 million people who have signed up for Obamacare plans since the Biden administration opened up the special enrollment period, which ends on August 15th, with the new subsidies and limits the COVID-19 relief bill placed on healthcare costs. Many are also paying much less for Obamacare plans than they have in the past, and goes on to say that even the skeptics are saying, I didn't like it when it first came out because it was too expensive, and now I'm saving $700 a month for my family. So if you help people, if you put money in their pocket, if you come up with a health insurance plan that actually works, it takes a lot of the steam out of the public option, whether that passes or not. And certainly, Medicare for all is not on the top of everybody's lips right now.
That's true. It has been quieter. I'm sure
there's several reasons for that. One is that Biden won and Bernie didn't, but another is that Obamacare is doing the job.
Well, if something's doing the job, then I guess it shouldn't be as much of a concern. I'm sure there are aspects of the job, though, that people will say, well, it isn't doing this part of the job, and it might not be, but okay. Yeah, I mean, it stands to reason that if there's not tremendous dissatisfaction across the board, then making gigantic changes in the way we do, 1/5 of the economy probably won't be uppermost on people's minds. Yeah. I mean, that's just politics, I think.
Right? Yep.
Okay, well then good. Or maybe bad. Depending.
Okay, and one last thing before I leave, which I just thought was interesting just because of where I'm from.
Originally,
well, that is the New York mayoral
New York, okay.
race.
Yeah,
So Andrew
all right,
Yang is running.
sure. It's like, what do they have, like 35,000 people running in this race?
Something like that.
Yeah, I have not been able to focus. What the hell is going on today? I don't know. What's news?
What
happened?
Hunter Walker is covering this race and wrote last night, the more I talk to people, the more I'm convinced the New York City mayoral race is more open than the polls might indicate. Hakeem Jeffries from the Congress endorsed Maya Wiley, for example. Okay. Voters really did wait to pay attention, and ranked choice voting is the mother of all wild cards. It's going to be a crazy home stretch. So nobody really knows who's ahead. Each of the individual people who are in the race have had things happen to them, accusations, this, that, everything else. Typical New York City mayoral race. The people who thought they had it locked up don't have it locked up. Andrew Yang is certainly very well known. And seems to be rather shallow in terms of his understanding of how the city works.
You should probably make him president.
Pretty conservative on a lot of issues. And it's not really clear how things are going to play out in terms of that race. So it just bears watching. It's interesting watching. And chances are whoever the Democratic nominee is will win. New York does elect Republican mayors. It has in the past.
Yes.
The conservatives who follow these things will immediately tell you crime is up, so that the Republicans are going to win. That's not really how it works in New York. Everybody's aware of crime in New York, but it's pretty complex in terms of your voting standards in terms of how you use that piece of information. It's just it's a complicated thing with a lot more than single issues driving stuff, unless you live on Staten Island.
No, okay, right. Simple life in Staten Island.
Yeah, just vote for the Republicans. That's the end of it. Right. But they're not the majority of the city, so we'll see how that plays out. So I just think that's really an interesting thing to keep an eye on. The mayoral debate really didn't have Yang performing especially well. Mm-hmm. And so that's what people pay attention to. And so, but do they pay attention at all? Will they vote? I don't know. We'll see.
When do they vote? Like, when are the primaries?
I don't know.
Okay.
It feels like it's soon.
The thing. You would think, because there's a lot of discussion about it, but it also feels like no one has been talking about the date, and so I'm confused. Am I there? I'm here.
I lost you for a minute, so I don't know if I'm there.
You're here.
But I'm going to try hanging up and calling you back.
Oh, no, you can't hear me, huh? Sure, all right, well, we'll try that. This is going to be like the latest callback ever. All right, weird. Okay, hi. How about now?
You're back.
Okay, I was always there, but... it's so much more interesting when we can hear one another. Although it must be fascinating for the listeners. I hear them both. So, all right.
Well, that's better. I don't know what happened. All of a sudden, the sound stopped at your end.
Sure, it's your new computer. Get rid of it and start over.
It's you.
Oh, all right. Could be new computer for me then. I'll take it.
Well, for me, but not for thee. So, New York elections 2020 on Ballotpedia. Election date, November 3rd.
November
2020. Sure, we want 2021.
Okay.
Here we go. Mayor. Statewide election dates, November 2nd, 2021. But what about mayor here?
Yeah.
Choose your state. Well, I want New York.
Like primary. Nothing?
They don't make it easy. I'm sure it's in here somewhere.
Okay.
Let's see. Let's say mayor, New York City primary.
Yeah.
United States mayoral elections 2021, section primary. Yeah, I know what it is. I want to know when it is.
They don't even know. And not only that, you have to register 34 and a half days beforehand or something crazy like that. Any more than that, you're out.
Right.
Or something like that.
No, they're not making it easy to find. So It's a wonderful site, except, if you're trying to do something very quickly.
I guess.
How do primaries work in New York? A primary election is an election in which registered voters select a candidate they believe should be a political party's candidate. Mm-hmm. How do I register? Well, We make it impossible.
Right. Yeah, you can't. What are you asking?
Vote in New York. One must be a U.S. citizen, a resident of the county, city, or village for at least 30 days prior to the election and at least 18 years old by the date of the election.
Yeah.
Okay. Governor Andrew Cuomo signed a bill into law on January 24, 2019, establishing a 10-day early voting period, and that will take place fully now, so that's good. Right. And then there's voter identification laws in the state, which is good, at least that they cover what it is. Every state has something. Voter ID in New York. New York does not require voters to present identification while voting. If a voter does not provide valid ID at the time of registration, he or she must show ID at the polling place when voting for the first time. See, you do it at registration,
when would that happen?
not. You don't have to, show it when you vote.
Oh, all right. If you vote, if you can figure out what
which
day
is
it is.
an interesting discussion that we've had about getting vaccines. Well, you have to show photo ID to get a vaccine. Well, you do if you're in a pharmacy, because pharmacies ask for that for everything. But you don't if you show up in your local health department. Nobody asks.
All right. When? We don't know that either. All right. So, I'm just like,
when are we there?
When will we find out, all right, we don't really have to pay attention to all 35 candidates necessarily. Probably going to be one of these three, something like that. I'd like to know when I might get a handle on this.
There's going to be probably 4 strong candidates. So.
4. All right. Well,
we'll see.
Whenever they get
all right.
to
Mayoral election in New
York,
York, 2021. Finally. Okay. 16 Democrats and 3 Republicans are running in the primaries on June 22nd, 2021.
Okay. All right,
that
makes sense.
The winners will advance to the general election on November 2nd, 2021. Sure. So June 22. So in a month.
Okay. All right. That makes a little bit more sense. I felt like,
it was coming, but it didn't feel like it was here yet. So I haven't paid that much attention to the exact date. But since you asked, it's June 22nd, 2021. And thank you, Ballotpedia, for giving me information about what a primary is.
Yes, right.
I'm new to these parts, and I've never done this before, and I really needed this information.
Yeah, it's like the early days of the New York Times using links. President Obama, and in case you don't know who that is, here's a link.
Right. This is a failing. See, I'm a native New Yorker.
Yeah.
Right? So you look up Ballotpedia New York.
Mm-hmm.
What? Why isn't this about the city?
It's
always about this. What are you telling me about the state? I don't want to know about the state. I said New York.
Right.
Tell me about the city.
Even Staten Island.
Yeah, exactly.
Would have worked there. Staten Island, by the way, a.k.a. Perth Amboy, New Jersey.
But still, the primary election will feature the first use of ranked choice voting, or RCV, for a mayoral primary in the city's history. That's going to be absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, with 16
Remember, one of the voting ideas, reforms throughout the country is looking at Alaska and how they do theirs. We talked about that the other day on the show. And Maine, of course, famous for ranked choice voting for certain elections.
Famous,
but not all.
The sense that, it happened.
Yeah. It happened.
Right.
It happened. And Jared Golden was elected because of it.
Okay.
Right? That makes it famous.
Yeah. Infamous. Okay. Well, yes. I'll be excited to see it happen.
That doesn't make it infamous.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
So, Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, New York City Sanitation Commissioner Catherine Garcia, who is Andrew Yang's second choice, he said, ranked choice voting. They were asked who would be second choice.
Oh, they asked all the... That's an interesting question. You can't usually ask that.
Well, a lot of people said, well, I'm not telling you. And Andrew Yang said, Catherine Garcia. And Garcia said, well, you're not my second choice.
Does that mean you get to be a deputy mayor eventually? We'll see.
Former Wall Street executive Raymond McGuire, New York City Comptroller Scott Stringer, who has accusations of stuff hanging out that's not been proven.
Right, you shouldn't have it hanging out, that kind of stuff.
Former mayoral council Maya Wiley, also.
All right, I just heard of her.
Discussion on she's been on MSNBC as a contributor.
Right.
And entrepreneur Andrew Yang, they've received the most media attention and noteworthy endorsements.
I know some of the names.
So Eric Adams, in some ways, is the favorite. Andrew Yang, in some ways, is the favorite. Wiley is something of an underdog. And we'll see what happens. Hard to predict.
Yeah, I mean, really, I have no guess whatsoever, and it's not like I've been involved in New York City politics or anything. But usually, I have some idea of, well, who is this person that's running? Andrew Yang, I've heard of because he, said he was running for president, and I believed him.
Right.
And
De Blasio is not running, which is good because
yeah,
everybody hates him.
But I've heard of him. That's the thing.
And the three Republicans running are the founder of the New York State Federation of Taxi Drivers, Fernando Mateo, retired New York Police Department officer William Pepitone, I don't know if it's any relation to Joe, and financier Sarah Tershwell.
You got to have a financier.
Yeah. Mayor de Blasio is not running for re-election. De Blasio was first elected in 2013, won re-election in 2017 with 66% of the vote. New York's a Democratic city, but does elect Republicans on occasion. Right. And for the previous 6 mayors are Democrats, 2 are Republicans. So, you can be an independent, like
that would
Bloomberg,
work. Right.
Who's really a Republican but claims to be a Democrat. That's what makes him independent.
Right. Something $1 billion going to be spent on something, yada, yada. Don't think it happened, but okay.
So that's, I just thought, worth going over. Yeah, it's of local interest to me, but, Andrew Yang is a national figure, so I thought maybe other people might find it interesting.
Well, if they did, he would be president, but they didn't. So, all right. Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like I need to keep up on it because it's, it's the subject of a lot of talk because a lot of our media based in New York. And I feel like this is just a weird field with nobody outstanding, which maybe is a great place to test something like ranked choice voting or, any of the other alternative measures that you could use to do this. But I guess ranked choice is the one they've made. And, you can't change how New York is going to hold their elections unless you do it 37 years in advance. So I guess that's it. It's going to be ranked choice voting. It's going to be interesting to see how that works out. If you
want to vote, register to vote.
Do you still have time?
I thought they had 30 days.
Yeah. Well, so you said end of June, so it's not the end of May yet, so that's about 30 days, right? So, all right, hurry up. Go ahead and do it.
Hurry up and do it.
Stand on one foot, fill out the form in quadruplicate. Because triplicate's too.
Because typically in New York,
small.
what happens is whenever you want to register, it's like 2 days too late.
Yeah,
whatever.
That's basically it. Yeah, if you go and they tell you that.
3.5 years before. Well, sorry, too late. You should have done it yesterday.
This is true. So, all right, make sure you do
Where
it.
Does it say? It says right here. You were supposed to register yesterday. That's our official date.
Yeah.
Every time you go in there and ask, you should have been yesterday.
Yeah, man. All right, so you got your chance to do it. If you're living in New York and you're tuned out from the mayoral race, I don't know what's wrong with you. Get back into it. Get your head back in the game. I know Trump was a distraction. Coronavirus might be bothering you. But get vaccinated, get registered, and get to the polls, I guess.
All right. And breaking news.
Boxes. Oh, yes?
Supreme Court agrees to take up a major abortion case that will give the court an opportunity to reconsider Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey. The case involves the constitutionality of Mississippi's ban on most abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy.
All right. Yeah, right. I figured they would.
It only allows exceptions for medical emergencies or severe fetal abnormality, not for rape, not for incest. So
I guess they like that in Mississippi. I don't know.
Now, that'll take a while, but that's on the docket.
Yes, big day for the Supreme Court, I think, for a lot of cases expected to come down, and I guess now announcements about what they will take up in their next term.
Right.
Okay, I forgot all about that because the highest court in the land, yada yada, blah blah blah. Who cares, right?
Something. Who cares? Because if you really cared, you would have voted like you cared, right? So.
Right, and there should be 13 of them anyway, and there's only 9, so we'll see. That won't change anytime soon, and none of the cases that they are taking up in the next term will likely face any more than 9 of them. Could be less, though. That could always happen.
Yeah, you never know.
We'll see. All right, great.
All right,
thanks,
that's it
Greg.
for me. And welcome to Monday. Again, with the former guy not there, things are much less chaotic on Mondays, but there's still a lot going on. So there's always stuff to talk about. I'll be back on Wednesday.
Excellent.
And we'll chat again about things. Maybe I'll even look it up beforehand so I'll know stuff like when's the New York mayoral primary.
Well, ate a good 10 minutes.
Like I knew you were going to ask me that, and I didn't have it ready. Because, who cares until it happens?
And they moved Wikipedia on your new computer, so it was impossible to find out.
Oh, this is Ballotpedia.
Yes.
And, apparently you have to
These
tell it when
knockoff
you want New
pedias.
York. You're talking about New York City. Who knew? Everybody upstate knew, you stupid New
Yes.
Yorker.
Well, it's the internet. It has a constituency all over the place.
Yeah. Well, how
I
long
might
does
as
it
well-
take
you
to
were
get me to
thinking about
the
Old
primary?
York.
Oh, about an hour.
I guess so. No matter
All
where
right.
you
I'll
are.
talk to you on Wednesday.
Very good. Thanks so much. We'll check in with you then. In the meantime, let's see. A good idea would be perhaps to check in on, all the fun write-ups about why the former guy is less effective in doing everything these days. So that has to do with the deplatforming. We'll talk about that. And then I also see a new Axios entry about how the former guy was also ineffective at doing things while he was the present guy. So lots to catch up on that. And we'll set that up. We're about a minute away from our break that signals the easiest time for catching our breath. But let's see, what can we fit in between? Yeah, man, not too much. Except, one fun story, except it involves possibly brutal murder. We'll throw that in before the break. Just letting you know that the latest, maybe the Trumpiest thing to ever happen in the world is encapsulated in the headlines about a man who is suspected of killing his wife, or at least in her disappearance, which generally speaking means that they think she is dead, but I guess they haven't found her yet. Not only apparently is accused of doing away with his wife, but after doing so, held on to her absentee ballot, now that she's an absentee forever, and cast her ballot in favor of Donald Trump, and just figured, what the hell, I've murdered my wife, but I'd also like to have law and order in this country, and I think she would have too, and I'm happy to do that. So the latest instance of voter fraud once again involves a Trump voter, and if you didn't think, they couldn't really be insurrectionists, they're just tourists, they wouldn't go so far as to kill in order to elect their guy or force their guy back into office. Not everyone agrees. We'll be right back. Okay, that did it.
All right, now I can sign up.
Now we're in murder. You can do that, but it's
Spare your listeners the blue.
sure. Everyone likes the blue, but now they know you were just sitting there not saying anything. Okay.
Yeah, but where's Abby?
Right. Where is she? Outside?
Yep.
All right. You know where the button is to let her back in?
No. I got a new model of Abby, and I'm just trying to reprogram her there.
Okay. All right. See you Wednesday. All right. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let me just run through that. I happen to have, unfortunately, the handiest write-up for it is The Hill once again, and I really should be beginning a boycott of The Hill. I should probably just mute them on Twitter. I'm upset with them because of the way they do things. And I know a lot of you say, hallelujah, it's a long time coming. But since I've already forgotten what it was over the weekend that bothered me about them, I'll come up with it later on. But anyway, the news is the news. We might as well get their rundown on that story on the arrest. It was a Colorado man, not even a Florida man, who was arrested last week in connection with his wife's disappearance, and I guess it's just a disappearance at this point. Anyway, he told investigators that he cast a mail-in ballot for former President Trump in her name last year because he believed voter fraud was widespread. That was the belief. Now, I understand what he's trying to say, which is that I think the other guys are cheating a lot, so I will cheat too to counteract that. But it's also very easy to read it as, well, I thought that voter fraud was widespread, so that meant it must be okay, so I'm going to participate in some of that too. And, wow, well, I mean, that's not much of an excuse, but there he goes. What does he have to say? Do we care about what his name is? Do we want to know? Are we making him famous? It doesn't feel like he's one of those I did this to become famous guys, like sometimes mass shooters do. But Barry Morphew, I guess, is his name. That might be the pronunciation. Morphew, if you want to get it right. He told FBI agents that he knew his wife, who disappeared, quote-unquote disappeared, last May, had planned to vote for Trump. And he added that he believed sending in a vote in her name was justified because, quote, I figured all these other guys are cheating as well, except look what happened. All those other guys got away with it and you got caught. I'm sure that's actually how he thinks about it, except what really happened is they weren't doing that and you did and you got caught because they catch these things. And it's actually pretty interesting that they did catch it because there was probably nothing on the face of it that would have had them flag it. It's just that she's been missing since May and it's now November, and somebody's job is to keep an eye on this guy's activities. The police are looking for his wife. They probably at this point in November suspected that they at least, in order to do a thorough job on the case, had to keep an eye on what he was up to. Like if he's, buying new cars with insurance money or something like that, they'll want to know about these things. And I'm sure, I guess it occurred, I wonder if it's in the article. I doubt it. It looks like a pretty short article, but did it occur to them, we should check to see whether she cast a ballot? I mean, probably the ballot would have been requested later than May, right? So they're already investigating. They're already thinking, well, traditionally it pays to keep an eye on the husband. So October or something now. So that's, let's say 4 to 5 months have passed and she hasn't turned up. And, the police are a government entity. Did they get a tip? Did they look? Did they just say, let's look on the online database and see if a absentee ballot has been requested? Because if so, where was the request made from? Because if we go there, she might be there. But if it's their house, then it's probably one, that it wasn't her that requested the ballot, which is perhaps fraud on its own. Or two, it gives us more reason to think that the husband might be behind it. Anyway. Barry Morphy was arrested last week, according to the news station. Which one? I don't know. I mentioned it earlier. Or I skipped it over it. Channel ABC 7 in Denver. I just thought, all right, yeah, so he was going to send in the thing. I figured all those other guys are cheating as well. Who are all those other guys? I don't know. I just thought, give him another vote, he said, according to the affidavit obtained by ABC 7. I know she was going to vote for Trump anyway, and yet you disappeared her. But maybe he didn't. I don't know. He's innocent until proven guilty. Barry Morphy was arrested last week, according to the news station, and charged with first-degree murder, so they're going with that. I don't know why they say it's the disappearance of his wife. Like, they really need to give him that kind of benefit of the doubt. He's charged with the murder. But, okay. And so, charged with first-degree murder in connection with the disappearance of his wife, Suzanne Morphew. ABC 7 reported that he was also charged with forgery. There we go. After a county clerk alerted investigators, it is in here, wow, that a ballot had been cast in Suzanne Morphew's name while she was on the National Missing Persons list. Now that's like a good database to cross-check with. I didn't know if she's just sort of missing and they're investigating. Maybe she's dead, maybe she's not. You'd think, like, that makes good sense and everything, but the idea that there would be policy in place, like, hey, clerk, while you're sitting and waiting for the election to happen, it's not a bad idea, right? I'm sure they're very busy with lots of things and lots of logistics that I never imagined that they were busy with, but that would make sense if you told me about it. But there's got to be a period of time before an election where clerks are like, I guess I should check the voter registration database again to make sure it's working or whatever, that you could be spending saying, I got an idea. While you're out for coffee, why don't you run this against the missing persons list or the we think this person got murdered list or something, and see, if you're interested in looking for fraud, that's a place to do it. So he did. Why it didn't detect, maybe she wasn't on the missing persons list yet when the ballot was requested, but that would be a good place to start too. Barry Morphew's claim that his actions were justified by supposedly widespread voter fraud comes after former President Trump baselessly spread conspiracy theories alleging such fraud throughout his presidency, as well as during his 2 runs for the White House. Former president also alleged that election fraud had occurred in multiple states in 2020, resulting in his defeat to President Biden. I don't think, as far as I know, was advocating murdering your wife whether you thought she was going to vote for him or not. That probably is the big upsetting thing. You shouldn't murder your wife if she's thinking of voting for me. You might at least consider letting her vote before you kill her, I guess, is what his position would be on this. And then the rest of it is, by the way, officials say there's no evidence of widespread fraud on a scale that would have significantly affected the 2020 election results. I guess we have to say it that way because there is evidence of fraud occurring, of course, during the election, except that all the evidence is of Trump voters casting additional ballots for themselves, dead relatives, whether they killed them or not. If they're dead, that's all that matters to them, I guess, and they went and cast those ballots even without murdering them. They died of natural causes, they cast their ballot. It's just a weird thing. But it's one of several items that are very weird and dark and disturbing about the way Republicans conduct themselves in general. Some of the people involved in what will be this roundup of people who are terrible are not definitively Republicans. I don't know anything about the people behind them, but I imagine they may be Republicans. But it struck me yesterday that there was this weird common thread at the end of the weekend of these terrible stories. That's one of them. And by the way, the version of it that I got from The Hill, I got it, one of my brothers texted me the article from The Hill. I didn't choose it from The Hill this time, though I may very well have done that. But what I found interesting, the article, when you click through to it, isn't illustrated this way, but in the text that I got, it's illustrated with a photo of Trump, of course, because Trump is sort of tangentially involved in this. Again, the headline, man suspected in wife's disappearance, accused of casting her ballot for Trump. So I'll mention that, if you know the backstory, that he killed his wife and cast the ballot for Trump. And it's illustrated with a picture of Trump, but it's Trump giving his double thumbs up, which I don't know if that was a conscious choice at The Hill. Like, the guy killed his wife and then committed voter fraud. And Trump is like, thumbs up for the wife killing and a thumbs up for the ballot fraud as well. It's an odd choice. And I can't quite blame him for it, but I do. And we should get him. Anyway, there's some other things here. I had a roundup of 4 weird articles about that. And here are some of the other terrible ones that we really should probably now delve into in our second hour. Working backwards in this was this news, and I'll give you all the stories, and then we'll read as many of them as we can. You really have to hear some of these headlines. One from The Independent, the newspaper in the UK, which I am sure there's an American report on this somewhere now, but this one is astonishing. You remember last week when Republican jackass, like emerging Republican jackass, a new sort of guy. Who was it? Who in defending, it was Andrew Clyde. You probably never heard of him before, except last week. He was the Republican who, I guess, during the hearings on the January 6th insurrection said that it wasn't an insurrection and that it was really more like a bunch of tourists coming to Washington, D.C. and just, demanding strenuously to be let in to the building. Well, that was ridiculous on its face, of course, and lots of people took time to ridicule that, but the new twist on this, and we will have to read this article, is that a reporter, a photographer, I guess, is it for Roll Call? The other trade mag. Oh, and I might not even be able to read this thing because I guess it's a pay article in The Independent. But I think I might be able to get around that. Oh, yes, and I can. But anyway, a photographer for Roll Call who was on hand on January 1st photographing the scene inside the House chamber during the insurrection and took some of those very famous photos of the Capitol Police, the plainclothes Capitol Police officers who were on the floor, barricading the doors to the House chamber against the rioters who were outside, and even drawing pistols and pointing them out the now broken windows so that the rioters could see, if you continue to try to break in here, you'll probably get shot. You've seen those photos. In some of those photos, it's not just the Capitol Police officers barricading the doors, but it is also various members of Congress who found themselves nearby and worried about their safety, helping and piling chairs and desks onto the barricades. And the roll call photographer said, look, I got to speak up because I just heard this Andrew Clyde clown say it wasn't an insurrection, it was a bunch of tourists. And when I took that picture, Andrew Clyde was one of the members of Congress piling up the desks. Because on January 6th, he was pretty sure it was a goddamn insurrection. He was piling, desks and chairs up to keep people out. And now he's like, oh, well, it was just like tourism. Which, boy, does that guy hate tourists. I mean, you ask him if he's ever barricaded the doors against tourists. And I don't know, I guess now he's forced to say yes, which is amazing. So, all right, I'll get to that story. But I guess I'll first finish up the roundup of the 4 terrible things that I put together. And it made me say at the end, we really got to do something about these guys. Actually, I said we need to hang like 50, like 500 of these guys. Republican or not. Here's one that might not be Republican. We'll get to the story, but I'll read you the tweet of Kevin Fox, who tweets as K Fury. Do I have the actual tweet nearby? Yeah, so I can maybe look up who is this guy, Kevin Fox. I don't know. He's a designer and founder at what? Really? He's the designer and founder of these 2 things? Gmail and Google Calendar and Google Reader. How do you like that? Plus a couple other things that are a little less well known. So does he have like 1 billion followers? Not even that many. Okay. So anyway, he's a popular guy. He's a blue check mark kind of guy. He has this to say. The pipeline. You remember the whole gas shortage thing. Maybe if you weren't in the Southeast, you only read about it in the paper. I live here, and the gas pumps were closed for a couple of days over the weekend. You heard the story, that cyber attack on the pipeline that shut it down. It was a ransomware attack. And then we heard at the end of the week that they actually the company paid the ransom in Bitcoin, which was interesting and surprising all by itself, and that some sort of Eastern European hackers had somehow hacked the thing, and they used ransomware, and they had to get a payment of 50 Bitcoins, which is a lot of money apparently, in order to release the whatever the hell it is that they do. Who knows what hackers and ransomware do. But the thing is, we were all led to believe, as this attack cut off the supply of gasoline for most of the Southeast, that the cyber attack was, I guess, attacking the software controlling the pipelines and just shut it off against the will of this, is it Colonial Pipeline? Yeah, okay, thank you, producers. CP is all I've got in front of me. Anyway, here's what Kevin Fox has to say about the story, using the tweet of Kim Zetter, a journalist, and I think an independent journalist in her own right, and writing in her own, Substack thing right now, that she had this story a couple of days ago, and she says CNN now confirms it. And here's what Kevin is saying she's confirming. The pipeline was fine the whole time. The hackers didn't seize control of the mechanism controlling the pipeline. They actually seized control of the computers that Colonial Pipeline used to do its billing. And Colonial Pipeline said, oh my God, if we can't accurately monitor which of our customers are taking how much gasoline, we can't bill them right. And if we can't bill them right, we're not going to make our money. And if we're not going to make our money, we should shut down the pipeline. They cut the supply of gasoline off to the entirety of the Southeast, lest they lose money. That is pretty incredible. Kim Zetter reporting here again. CNN has now confirmed what I wrote 4 days ago, that CP shut down their pipeline because they couldn't bill customers. Per CNN's reporting, the company halted operations because its billing system was compromised, and they were concerned they wouldn't be able to figure out how much to bill. People were waiting in line for gas for hours, like the gas shortage of the 70s. The lines wrapped around the block. I drove around a little bit the other day to try to see if there was anybody locally that either didn't have huge lines or had any gas, but most of them had the bags over the pump handles and everything. They were just cleaned out. That was all because, what if we can't get all the money we're supposed to have? So I don't know if they're Republicans, but again, the idea of just cutting off an entire region of the United States from its gasoline because, we might not make as much money as we're supposed to, is like, do we really have no control over that? That you can't nationalize that sort of thing? That is pretty amazing. And I bet that'll result in some hearings in Congress and then not much else. But it would be very interesting to see what happens. Let's see. There were more other things that are also terrible, maybe more so. And here's one of them. Okay, the fourth one. Again, I'm going to get the actual tweet so I can jump back to it. This from the Daily Beast's reporting that was being widely discussed yesterday. I guess it was from the end of last week. And this is kind of amazing too. Basically, it comes down to this. Jared Kushner is at fault here, and so you can be angry about this. The headline at the Daily Beast: Trump feared testing too many people for virus would spook stock markets, says report. This report, or from the Daily Beast version of it, from Jamie Ross, covering the fact that I guess the Financial Times was reporting that basically Jared Kushner, it says, had been arguing that testing too many people, this is early on in the pandemic, like March and April of last year. Kushner was arguing that testing too many people or ordering too many ventilators, remember when that was the issue? Doing either of those things, which in other words were no-brainers everywhere else in the world. He said to Trump, don't do it because it will spook the markets. And I'm sure people said, that's terrible and all, but what are we supposed to do? If we can't do that, what are we going to do? He said, nothing. Do nothing. The main thing is don't spook the markets. And then 600,000 people died. That just is a follow-up here. But apparently that advice worked far more powerfully on Trump, it says here, than what the scientists were saying. He thinks they always exaggerate. So that's pretty incredible all by itself, that Jared Kushner said, we're facing this global pandemic, but don't test people. Don't get too many ventilators, because if that happens, you and I personally might lose money. And the people who support us might lose money because the markets will tank. Of course the markets are going to tank. It's a global pandemic. The markets were going to tank anyway. You might as well try to save people's lives. But no, not Jared Kushner. So like I said, between what do end to the weekend? Kushner convinces Trump, don't test people, don't get ventilators because we'll lose money in the stock market. Who knows what their political affiliation is over at Colonial Pipeline, saying, let's cut off gasoline to the southeastern seaboard because we might not get as much money as we're supposed to for our gasoline if we don't, and we can blame it on hackers. Well, they sort of are at fault. They messed up our billing system. Never the pipeline. That's really surprising. Guys disappearing their wives and stealing their mail-in ballots to vote for Trump, and jackasses like, what's his name, piling up desks. Andrew Clyde photographed piling up desks outside of the House or inside the House chamber doors and saying, tourism. So I don't know what to tell you, but invest in rope, I guess. I don't know. We did build one of those multiple person gallows that they had for executing the Abraham Lincoln conspirators. It's what are we doing? What a situation we've put ourselves in. Let's read through some of these stories and get the full picture. I'll start back at the Independent because they tried to block me first. So, haha. I'm going to get around their paywall. I feel bad about it. There's journalists in England not getting paid, but I don't know. I guess they could. We'll give them some of the Bitcoin, I guess, that we take back from the pirates that hijacked the billing system. My gosh. Anyway. A photo has emerged of Andrew Clyde, the Republican congressman who claimed, quote, there was no insurrection, and compared U.S. Capitol rioters to tourists. What's the photo? It's him barricading the House chamber during the attack. You should see the picture, too. The Representative Clyde news reminded me of this. Roll call photographer Tom Williams tweeted this week, and included a picture of the Georgia congressman in a group of 8 men pushing a piece of furniture against doors to the chamber. Speaking on Wednesday to the House Oversight Committee, Representative Clyde downplayed the actions of the pro-Trump mob who stormed the Capitol on January 6th as, quote, a normal tourist visit, unquote. The violent attack left 5 dead, including 1 police officer, as one of the House members who stayed in the Capitol and on the House floor, who, with other Republican colleagues, helped barricade the door until almost 3 p.m. from the mob who tried to enter, I can tell you the House floor was never breached and it was not an insurrection, Mr. Clyde told the committee. What? That's amazing, too, because apparently all the news reports I saw left out that context, which is amazing because the context is quite damning, actually, for himself. As one of the members who stayed in the Capitol on the House floor and barricaded the door from the mob who tried to enter, from all of that, I can tell you the House floor was never breached. That happened. That's true. But that it was not an insurrection, like, how would that follow? No harm, no foul. They didn't make it onto the House floor, so it's not an insurrection. They made it onto the Senate floor. They had to shoot somebody in the Speaker's lobby. But what? He goes on, it was not an insurrection, and we cannot call it that and be truthful. That's astounding. I mean, it's almost a better and more understandable story if he just says, well, it wasn't an insurrection, it was like tourists. And then somebody says, well, that's not what you thought on January 6th. But here he's saying, it is what I thought on January 6th, even though I was barricading the doors. That's amazing. What's wrong with this guy? Mr. Clyde's remarks were lambasted by lawmakers. Is that how we say that, by the way? I've had varying interpretations of the pronunciation of lambasted, lambasted. What are we going to... baste, it makes me think like basting a lamb that you're roasting on a spit. Is it lambasted? Well, anyway. Mr. Clyde's remarks were, let's say, not well received. Among other lawmakers and law enforcement experts, Fred Wellman, the executive director of the Lincoln Project and a former commanding officer of U.S. forces in Iraq, wrote, how craven is Representative Clyde to say there was no insurrection? He helped barricade the doors from the, quote, tourists. They know lying to the MAGA mob equals money, so that's all that matters. Also issuing a retort, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi referred to death threats against her and former Vice President Mike Pence during a press conference on Wednesday. Well, I don't know a normal day around here where people are threatening to hang the Vice President of the United States or shoot the Speaker in the forehead, said Ms. Pelosi, as CBS reported. I don't consider that normal. Hundreds of people responded on Twitter to the photo of Mr. Clyde barricading the door. It's a well-known fact that it is a time-honored tradition to barricade doors when tourists are strolling nearby, tweeted one user, Robin Messing. Another user, Vivian Hash, tweeted, do Georgians always barricade doors against normal everyday tourists? Some other Republicans have sought to downplay the events of January 6th, of course, which took place after former President Trump's Save America rally, where he and his allies repeated false claims that the election had been stolen. Pro-Trump mob then stormed the U.S. Capitol in an attempt to prevent Congress from certifying Joe Biden as the next president. More than 400 people have been charged with taking part in the riot. On Wednesday, Representative Paul Gosar falsely claimed that Capitol officers were harassing peaceful patriots on January 6th, according to NBC News. Wow. Fellow Republican Jody Heiss added on Wednesday, it was Trump supporters who lost their lives that day, not Trump supporters who were taking the lives of others. Some of them did lose their lives. Some of them tased themselves, but whatever. Jody Heiss, by the way, the one primarying, is it Brad Raffensperger? I think he's running for Georgia Secretary of State, unless he's actually challenging the governor. I can't recall which one he jumped in for. On Wednesday, Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney was ousted from her role as Republican conference chair. You know all about that. And that's it. We'll wrap things up, and good thing, too, because it's time for another break. After the break. Sure, why don't we wait until after the election? Next November, I'll bring you stories about the rest of this. I think I would like to dive into the Jared Kushner is a rotten piece of crap story just one more time, because it's kind of amazing. And we'll, after that, perhaps explore, I guess Axios, doing its Axios kind of thing, has a long-running series, which I have not taken note of to date, but they have an entry today that got a lot of attention this morning on Twitter about some of the kookier things, very scary things in some cases, that Donald Trump tried to get done in the last couple of days that he had in the White House, but failed to be able to do because he was always incompetent to all the tasks that he thought he wanted to accomplish, and thank God he was, but we'll clear that up after this. 2 minutes. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. It makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Man, too much. Okay, let's see. A few things we'll try and cram into the final segment here and see how far we can get on all of this. Lots of different directions to go. But let me jump over to the Daily Beast and just give you the background on this. And it's a short piece in the Daily Beast, but it depends on the Financial Times, which I think has made their piece free to read. But as I recall, the Financial Times piece on which this report in the Daily Beast is based is not new. It is, in fact, old. And if I'm reading it correctly, it is a year old. And that's kind of amazing all by itself. Like, what made the Daily Beast... Oh, no. Well, you know what? The Daily Beast piece itself is old. So I guess what's of interest to me here is how this comes to light, or it comes to be included in tweets from just yesterday. Is this an old tweet even that I'm looking at? Because this is interesting, because it was... All right, I got to scroll back and find the thing. Jamel Bowie, yeah, it too. An old tweet. Why it was in renewed circulation, I have no idea. But I guess this is well known. And I mean, I suspected as much, that whatever is going on here. I mean, Trump was saying, of course, out loud, and we knew at the time, well, don't test more people because more tests creates more cases. You remember that whole thing. If you test people, you'll find out they have it. And if they have it, then the numbers will look bad, and that's a bad thing. And that's, I guess, led us to the point we're at today, where we still don't know how many people have had this disease and how many people have died from it. And we still have nothing but an almost certain undercount. But I don't think it registered with me at the time that Kushner or anybody else was saying, let's also not order enough ventilators. Because eventually they made a big deal of having ordered so many of them that they were then, we've got too many of them, we're going to send them to Russia, even though the ones that the Russians sent us explode. You remember that business too. How this has how this came to be circulated again now, I still have no idea. I don't think I can figure it out. But anyway, I guess because I didn't note it at the time, we'll note it now. And the upshot of it is it'll make you want to say that bad things should happen to Donald Trump and Jared Kushner. And that's very much in keeping with the theme of this show. But here it is, the old report. Should we then, well, I guess since it's old, maybe we'll just quick read the Daily Beast summary of it. President Trump was wary of making preparations for the coronavirus pandemic because he was concerned doing so would send the stock market into a panic, the Financial Times reports, and reported a year ago. In a quote attributed to an unnamed Trump confidant who is said to speak to the president frequently, that's his problem, it's claimed Jared, and then they helpfully bracket Kushner here, in case you didn't know which Jared, had been arguing that testing too many people or ordering too many ventilators would spook the markets, and so we just shouldn't do it. That advice worked far more powerfully on Trump, we mentioned this before, than what the scientists were saying, because he thinks they always exaggerate. Elsewhere, in the Financial Times investigation into Trump's handling of the coronavirus pandemic, an unnamed administration official is reported to have told the paper that trying to advise the president is like, quote, bringing fruits to the volcano. What do we mean by that? What does he mean? You're trying to appease a great force. Maybe he's not that great, but appease a great force that's impervious to reason. That's an interesting way of putting it. The Financial Times piece is long and involved and worth reading, except it's a year old, and so maybe not. But I read a little bit of it, and it was kind of astonishing just in terms of it was so astonishing, I believed it could even be current reporting, except that occasionally it gives itself away with the phrasing. And here, this, again, in keeping with the theme of the show, when the history is written of how America handled the global era's first real pandemic, March 6th will leap out of the timeline. That was the day Donald Trump visited the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, of course. Everybody just says CDC, though, in Atlanta. You remember this. His foray into the world's best disease research body was meant to showcase that America had everything under control. It came midway between the time he was still denying the coronavirus posed a threat at the moment and the moment he said he had always known it could ravage America. And by the way, now's a great time to also remind ourselves of this and those incredible interviews, incredible in the sense that I don't know who should hang first, Trump or Bob Woodward, for conducting the interview and then saving it for a book. But you remember that interviews in which Trump was like, oh yeah, it's going to kill everybody, but I'm not going to do anything about it. Okay, so shortly before the CDC visit, Trump said, within a couple of days, infections are going to be down to close to zero. You all remember that. By the way, Worldometers puts us at about 33.7 million confirmed infections. And of course, most experts are saying, well, it actually could be closer to like 100 million people infected. We just don't know about it because they didn't want to test people because stock market. I mean, this is just murder. But anyway, aside from that. Anyway, then the U.S. cases then were about 15. One day he said, remember this one, it's like a miracle. It will disappear. Well, it hasn't. A few days afterwards, he claimed, ironically enough, right? A few days later, he says, I felt it was a pandemic long before it was called a pandemic. You remember that. He was just trying to sound like he was like scientifically knowledgeable and on top of things. When it became obvious that his position from 2 days earlier was cuckoo bananas. Anyway, that afternoon at the CDC provides an X-ray into Trump's mind, such as it is, I would say, at the halfway point between denial and acceptance. We now know, and I guess we've known for a year, that COVID-19 has already passed the breakout point in the U.S., okay? The contagion had been spreading for weeks in New York, Washington State, and other clusters. The curve was pointing sharply upwards. Trump's goal in Atlanta was to assert the opposite. Of course, he's at the headquarters of the people who know that that is not true. Wearing his Keep America Great baseball cap, which he shouldn't have been doing, the U.S. president was flanked by Robert Redfield, head of the CDC, Alex Azar, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and Brian Kemp, governor of Georgia. Funny now. In his 47-minute interaction with the press, Trump rattled through his greatest hits. He dismissed CNN as fake news, boasted about his high Fox News viewership, cited the U.S. stock market's recent highs. And by the way, he now disparages Fox News viciously, right? Cited the U.S. stock market's recent highs, called Washington State's Democratic governor a snake, and admitted he hadn't known that large numbers of people could die from ordinary flu. He also misunderstood a question on whether he should cancel campaign rallies for public health reasons, saying, "I haven't had any problems filling the stadiums." Okay. What caught the media's attention, though, were two comments he made about the disease. There would be 4 million testing kits available within a week. "The tests are beautiful," he said. "Anybody that needs a test gets a test." 10 weeks later, and that's when this article was written, that is still not close to being true. Fewer than 3% of Americans had been tested by mid-May. Trump also boasted about his grasp of science. He cited a super genius uncle, remember, John Trump, who taught at MIT, and implied, of course, that he had inherited his intellect. "I really get it," he said. "Every one of these doctors said, 'How do you know so much about this?' Maybe I have a natural ability." Historians might linger on that observation, too. What the headlines missed was a boast that posterity will take more seriously than Trump's self-estimated IQ or the exaggerated test numbers. The true number of CDC kits by March, by the way, 75,000, not 4 million. Trump proclaimed that America was leading the world. You remember this part? South Korea had its first infection on January 20th, same day as America's first case, and was, he said, calling America for help. "They have a lot of people that are infected. We don't. All I say is, be calm," said the president. "Everyone is relying on us. The world is relying on us." And he was right about that. He just couldn't handle it. He could just as well have said that baseball is popular or foreigners love New York. American leadership in any disaster, whether a tsunami or an Ebola outbreak, has been a truism for decades. The U.S. is renowned for helping others in an emergency. Some other things, too. Okay. In hindsight, Trump's claim to global leadership leaps out. History will mark COVID-19 as the first time that ceased to be true. U.S. airlifts have been missing in action. America cannot even supply itself. South Korea, which has a population density nearly 15 times greater and is next door to China, has lost a total of 259 lives to the disease. There have been days when America has lost 10 times that number, and it got worse, of course. The U.S. death toll at the time of the writing of this piece, now approaching 90,000. We are above 600,000. We quietly passed 600,000, according to Worldometers, over the weekend. We are now in danger of losing more people in just over 1 year to COVID-19 than were lost to the 1918 flu epidemic that ravaged the United States for over 2 years. So there you go. And the rest of the piece, I'm sure, is equally fascinating. It's just long and involved, but that should give you a flavor of what's in this thing, and that it's been sitting out there for a year, and somehow we've managed not to notice, or I managed not to notice. I feel like we knew what was going on, but some of the specifics I wish we had known all along. Not that it would have affected things. I mean, Trump was who he was, and we knew it, and that was that. Let's see. Some other things that I wanted to bring to your attention, though, are also parked in Pocket, and maybe some of them we can run through quickly, and others not so much, but we can spend some more time on it. Let's see. All right, here's the pipeline story. I'll provide you with all of that, including Kim Zetter's Substack reporting on that, if that's available publicly. Let's see. A few other items. Quick note on this one. Just happened to see this over the weekend, too. The tweet of Kevin Liptak, a CNN White House reporter, just noting for the record, I think on Friday, that Biden had just officially revoked the executive order for, remember Trump's idiotic National Garden of American Heroes thing that he wanted to create with statues of famous Americans inside a garden somewhere, and he had a list of like 5 billion people, and nobody knew what the hell where did that come from, and something. I guess that was reaction to like people pulling down Confederate statues. So he wanted to make more statues. And anyway, it was a dumb idea, and it never went anywhere, and Biden just revoked the executive order. So I guess that's not happening, which is fine, unless you're a statue maker or a gardener, and we're looking forward to, maybe reaping the federal business on that. Just thought I would point that out. A good follow-up piece. And speaking of follow-up, there are one or two other things that I wanted to present to you. You might recall that we asked last week when Elise Stefanik won the House Republican Conference chair position, whether there was anybody else besides Chip Sahoy Roy running for the position, and there was. So Stefanik got 134 votes, Roy got 46, but there were also 9 votes cast for president, which was interesting, which, by the way, given the general way of things among the Republicans, they probably thought they were voting to get a present. I'd like a present. I'll vote that. But instead, they just recorded their presence, but inability to make a decision on this thing. There were also 3 other votes cast, one apiece for a bunch of other idiots. Let's see. Fox, is that Virginia Fox, got 1 vote. Jim Jordan got 1 vote. Jim Jordan voted for himself. Jim Jordan's jacket absconded with his ballot and then voted for Jim. I don't know what happened. And then who's CMR? It's a well-known acronym for one of the Republicans, and I can't remember which one it is. And dang, it doesn't. If it rings a bell for you, let me know. CMR. I was going to say. Oh, is that Kathy McMorris Rogers? Right, our friend Kathy McMorris Rogers McBean. Dang, I can't believe I forgot that. And I'm also handed a note here. Speaking of can't believe it. Let's see. Can't believe you passed up the opportunity to compare Trump to the Big Woo. That's true. The volcano that we were. It's because no one ever gave the Big Woo fruits. Give it orange soda and Tom Hanks, but that was it. Yeah, but a good call there. The Big Woo. Well, we did miss that opportunity, and it's a movie quote, and that would have helped things along immensely. All right, other news that will require, I think, just a little more focus than the brief updates, but I thought some of those were important and worth catching up on. Let's see. Let me roll back up to the top here. I told you about the Axios articles, the series, ongoing series. This is episode 9, so I've missed 1 through 8, or maybe I've read some of them and I just don't know it. But this is an interesting bit of news. It was commented on. David Frum was talking about this today or tweeting about it. I just happened to notice. Episode 9 of Off the Rails, which I feel like we might have checked in on at some point earlier in their series. But Jonathan Swan, Zachary Basu on this piece today, episode 9, Trump's War with His Generals. And again, I don't know, do we spend all day on reading through this piece or what? We'll see what comes of it. But first up top is the note that the Axios Off the Rails series documents the end of the Trump administration from election night 2020 through the January 6th siege of the U.S. Capitol. So we probably read some of those pieces earlier. One important piece is now only now beginning to emerge. Former President Donald Trump's last-minute bid to pull U.S. forces from Afghanistan and swaths of the Middle East, Africa, and even Europe ahead of Joe Biden's inauguration, and why he blinked. Not much discussed, not much commented on. I feel like in the rush of items post-election, it got mentioned that he wanted to do this, but now a much more close-up look at the crazy involved in it. John McEntee, it begins, one of Donald Trump's most favored aides, handed retired Army Colonel Douglas McGregor a piece of paper with a few notes scribbled on it. He explained, "This is what the president wants you to do." So apparently he hands this retired Army colonel, who I guess is liaison in some way to the Pentagon. The president wants you to take this over to the Pentagon and get this done. So it's like, I'm sure you think, talk to so-and-so about this detail or that detail, and work on, make sure this thing is underway, et cetera, et cetera. But instead, it's like basically Trump's entire military agenda for his full 4 years that he never got around to, folded into this little hand-scribbled note. 1, get us out of Afghanistan. Like, that's literally what the president of the United States is, just sort of that detached from everything. I want to get us out of Afghanistan. That's an interesting goal. But, there's a whole working group thing, and you work together, you put together a big plan about exactly how to do that, and what the timetables are, and the logistics of getting the people out of there, and the geopolitics of what happens afterwards. Not him. He tweets on paper. Tell this retired Army colonel, is he going over to the Pentagon today? Good, you can bring over this package. What's in it? 1, my instructions. 1, get us out of Afghanistan. 2, get us out of Iraq and Syria. 3, complete withdrawal from Germany because they don't pay. And 4, get us out of Africa because who cares about Africa? That's the note. Get us out of Afghanistan. Get us out of Iraq and Syria. Complete withdrawal from Germany. Get us out of Africa. Just on the face of it, by the way, not really even sure. I mean, it's 4 things. 3 of them are get us out of, and get us out of. The third one also entails getting us out of, but it isn't phrased as get us out of. Like, why doesn't that say get us out of Germany? I'm not sure. But he can't, maintain a thought across 3 bullet points, but then picks it back up for the 4th. It's weird. Anyway, this was November 9th, 2020. Days after Trump lost his re-election bid, 10 weeks before the end of his presidency, and just moments after McGregor was offered a post as senior advisor to acting Defense Secretary Christopher Miller, himself, of course, much in the news lately. As the head of the powerful Presidential Personnel Office, McEntee had Trump's ear. Even so, McGregor was astonished. He told McEntee he doubted they could do all of these things before January 20th. I don't think he could have got them all done in 4 years, probably maybe with a concerted effort. But I guess basically they bring this guy in to say, we want to make you senior advisor to Chris Miller over at the Pentagon. Okay. All right, great. You're going to do it? Good. When you go over there, do this. Get us out of Afghanistan. Really? Well, okay, so he says, I don't think we can do all this before January 20th. Then do as much as you can, McEntee replied. In McGregor's opinion, Miller probably couldn't act on his own authority to execute a total withdrawal of U.S. forces from Afghanistan because he was serving, of course, in an acting capacity. If this was for real, does the president really want to do this? If that's for real, McGregor tells McEntee, then he's going to need an order from the president, not a handwritten note that says, get me out of Afghanistan. Well, what is the order? What sort of order do they end up getting? A 1-page memo. Is it just this one? This memo, the 4 points, or is this a new, we need an order? Okay, well, I'll type something up. The 1-page memo was delivered by courier to Christopher Miller's office 2 days later on the afternoon of November 11th. It took him 2 days to get a 1-pager. The order arrived seemingly out of nowhere, and its instructions, signed by Trump, were stunning. All U.S. military forces will be withdrawn from Somalia by December 31st, 2020. All U.S. forces were to be withdrawn from Afghanistan by January 15th, 2021. They literally wants to do this with the last hours of his presidency. What the F is this? They actually used the word here. Miller wondered. A former Green Beret, Miller had directed the National Counterterrorism Center and was accustomed to following process. Trump had tapped him to run the Pentagon after his unceremonious firing by tweet of Mark Esper. It was Miller's 3rd day on the job. News of the memo spread quickly throughout the Pentagon. Top military brass, including Joint Chief of Staff Chairman General Mark Milley, was appalled. Well, rather, top brass were appalled. Milley was. This was not the way to conduct policy. This is 4 years, and this is the very end of his administration. He's still doing this stuff. This was not the way to conduct policy, with no consultation, no input, no process for gaming out consequences or offering alternatives. A call was quickly placed to the White House counsel, Pat Cipollone. In turn, Cipollone notified the National Security Advisor, Robert O'Brien. Neither Cipollone nor O'Brien had any idea what the order was or where it had come from. Like, that sounds like a forgery to me, I would say. I mean, maybe because I know Trump is an idiot, he probably did issue it and did sign it. But this is the sort of thing that you would say, I think I doubt the authenticity of this because it's bat-ass crazy. And it's crazy on so many levels. One, to do all these things. Maybe it's not that crazy to want to withdraw, but to simply say, I just lost the election as a lame duck. In the next couple hours, I want you to take care of these things. Just withdraw. But, it's the sort of thing that would make me want to have confirmation. But even if I got confirmation, I'd say it's still not really happening. No. So they had no idea where it came from. Neither did the office of the staff secretary, whose job it was. You remember what the staff secretary does over at the White House? We learned about this. I think we learned at some point. Didn't Brett Kavanaugh hold that job at some point? Anyway, this is the person whose job it is to vet all the paper that reached the president's desk. The person who controls the flow of paperwork, who knows what's really getting to the desk and what's really coming out of the president's hands, like actual orders. Did you see him sign it? Yes, no. That person had no idea about this thing. Yet the paper bore Trump's distinctive Sharpie signature. That's impossible for Putin to be able to forge that, right? I mean, I think we all believe that Trump actually issued this thing. The question is, one, why? And two, I guess you might ask, well, who would benefit from a total, complete, and precipitous withdrawal from Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, and Africa? Right? I mean, I guess your mind immediately goes to, well, I guess Putin and the Russians would like that. Yeah, but they can't just forge an order from the President of the United States. There's process, right? Nobody would get a handwritten note that says, I want you to surrender everybody. Just give your guns to Putin. We surrender to Russia. We love them now. Signed, President. Like you would say, that's clearly that's just garbage, right? That's not even a good Russian forgery. But that actually happened in the United States. And the Russians may have had nothing whatsoever to do with producing it. The President of the United States himself was that kind of idiot and would just fire that off. You know how dangerous, God, we came so close. I can't believe, if it wasn't for the deep state, and that's not necessarily that, they were pushing back against him, just in terms of pure bureaucratic process. Like, we can't do this thing. I have to have something more official than a gum wrapper even if it's from the president. Okay. So it had a Sharpie signature. They didn't know what to do. The U.S. government's top national security leaders soon realized they were dealing with an off-the-books operation by the commander-in-chief himself. Wow. What do we do with this? Many would rally to push back, sometimes openly and in coordination, at other times so discreetly that top administration officials had to turn to classified intercepts from the National Security Agency for clues. Trump's instincts should have come as little surprise. He was frantically trying to salvage his own legacy while simultaneously trying to overturn the election results and block Biden's transition to power. The result was chaos. Trump's calls to halt the endless wars could be traced back to at least 2011, when he was a real estate developer and reality TV celebrity. He'd sent scores of tweets railing against the U.S. military presence in Iraq and Afghanistan while mulling the idea of running for president. Once in office, though, Trump's ambitions to withdraw from Afghanistan and other countries were subdued, slow-rolled, and detoured by military leaders. Trump did not help his own agenda when he surrounded himself at the start with generals, many of whom had made their careers at U.S. Central Command. they fundamentally disagreed with the president's worldview. They were personally invested in Afghanistan, and several would come to see it as their job to save America, ironically enough, and the world from their commander-in-chief. By the spring of 2017, two generals Trump had installed in top positions, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis in an interagency process run by National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, had begun working on an option to send 4,000 additional troops to Afghanistan. This became a fundamental policy battle that attracted a full array of civilian, military, and political warriors, some assembling in the first flush of Trump's presidency, but leaving within a year. So there's lots more to it, of course, and it's definitely worth the read. And I guess I'm going to take a look back at what other episodes of this series from Axios might I have missed. It's the first time I'm excited about reading anything in Axios. But what a stunner, I guess. I mean, we always knew he was really like that, but it's still appalling to see it out in the open like that. Like, what do you do with this? And I love the phrasing at the end here that they were looking at an off-the-books operation allegedly ordered by the president himself and in the most careless possible fashion. I don't know. Clearly, you're not surprised by this, but I felt like I had to bring it to your attention. We've got a full week to try and digest this and a lot more. Of course, plenty of things we didn't yet get to. But hey, that's what the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is for, except I really shouldn't just assign him the job of cleaning up all my messes. He's an independent-minded fellow and has his own agenda, damn it. And here's what's part of it. I can squeeze a little bit in, and then the rest of it after. How about this? A GOP lawmaker ripped his colleague's denial of the insurrection as bogus. I bet we can figure out which guy it was.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, of course, any denial of the insurrection is bogus, but we'll see whether it's the same dude we were talking about earlier. What else has he got for us? The trial for corporate giants facing lawsuits over opioid addictions is about to begin. Oh, good. This is a great story. I wish we had gotten to this one, too. You should see the emails that were flying back and forth between these guys. I bet that's what Justice has on his mind. We'll see next.